Well, I was thinking about doing some lifestyle reading, and I got a lifestyle book about slow living out of the Kindle Unlimited selection, and hated it and returned it. And instead, I'm going to talk about these two books, which are also slow living, but without a bunch of instructions. One of them is House on the Irish Hillside, and the other is Tea and Talk. This video is part of a collaboration named Thursday BookTube, hashtag Thursday BookTube. It's hosted by myself and Life with Patty. Every Thursday, new videos about books, about literacy, about bookstores, about little free libraries. It's pretty much open. Coloring books, rearranging bookshelves. As long as there's a letter in it, a word, something written, I don't know. We're pretty free and easy because we're free and easy people. Just upload your video, hashtag at Thursday BookTube, and tag myself and Patty, and we'll make sure you get on the playlist. If for whatever reason you're not on the playlist, or you do not hear from us, we do not comment, please let one of us know in the comments so that we can remedy that. Sometimes we miss them. So I was looking for some easygoing books to read, so I picked up this one book on Kindle Unlimited. I'm not going to say what the name of it was because I don't like to trash, but it was a book about slow living. I thought, well, it'd be kind of fun to read, just peaceful, quiet. But I hated it. I got about a third of the way through, and I probably wouldn't have gotten that far through. But I thought to myself, you know what? I want to talk about this with the book Thursday BookTube. But this is like insane. I'll kill myself. I'll kill the author. It's awful. What annoyed me about the book is that slow living is supposed about finding peace in your life and an appreciation for the little things, and just making yourself and your environment a little oasis of calm in a world which is often not calm. The author and her husband decided to do this, but there were so many instructions on how to get this done and lifestyle changes, it just infuriated me. First of all, they decided, well, they got married, which is fine. They decided not to have children because children interfere with slow living. No kidding. And they decided to move to France because France has better salaries and more time off, so they could enjoy traveling and enjoy slow living more. And there were other things that came up, and I just wanted to throw the book against the wall, but I didn't. I just returned the book to Kindle Unlimited. I did check the date. I thought maybe this was some crazy dream from 2000, but it was written in 2023, and I don't know how realistic all of that is for the average normal person, and I'm an average normal person. So I immediately finished reading that and picked something else up, which was this House on the Irish Hillside, and it is by Felicity Hayes-McCoy. And then I remembered I had the second book I'd read years ago by Alice Taylor called Tea and Talk. And both these books talk about slow living, but they're actually living the slow living instead of talking about the slow living. In House on the Irish Hillside, Felicity, who was born and raised in Ireland, decides to go to London to further her career. She's in the performing arts, and while she's there, she meets her husband, who is English, and he is a musician slash director. So they're both in the performing arts, writing and performances and music and those sort of things. And they're both employed in London, and while in London, they go ahead and they purchase a home and then another home. And then they start leaving London from time to time to go to this little town on the west coast of Ireland near the Dingle, or on the Dingle Peninsula. Alice Taylor also lives in Ireland, as I mentioned, on the east coast of Ireland, and she has spent most of her life there, and every chapter of this book talks about a simple little element of her life there. Her linen cabinet, tea time, the priest. She takes little snippets of her life and writes little essays about them, much like Felicity does. So both books, although different, because Alice is an older woman looking back on years of history and her own history in that village, and Felicity is a newcomer to the village she lives in, and she's so committed to living there that she starts learning the Irish language. And she says the Irish language is more spoken on the west coast of Ireland than on the east coast of Ireland, and she uses a lot of Irish words to describe things and to describe places. Alice, on the other hand, does not really get into the Irish language too much. Every once in a while a word will come up that's probably in common usage, and she will mention that in the book in the context of what she's writing. So what I learned from both these books that I read back to back, the House on the Irish Hillside I read first. I'd never read that, and then I went and reread Tea and Talk, is that it is possible to have a career, to have a life, to have a family, to have commitments, and also to have a beautiful, slow living life that appreciates the weather, that appreciates the neighbors, that appreciates the history, the traditions, the cooking, the food, the seasons, all those things. Both women talk about the traditions in their little separate Irish villages and the sort of traditions that everyone does for the holidays, for the spring, for greeting new neighbors. In the Irish Hillside book, Felicity talks about a huge storm that came in, and they're about 2 or 3 miles from the ocean. And she said they woke up the morning after this huge storm to find an enormous pieces of seaweed in their garden. And they thought, what the heck could this be? That must have blown like 2 miles. That must have been a bigger storm than we could have ever imagined. Well, it turned out it was not a storm. A neighbor brought it by because the tradition in that community is that you use the seaweed for gardening. And he figured they weren't able to get to the beach and they might not have known about using seaweed in the garden, so he just brought some seaweed and dropped it off. It was a lovely story, and I could definitely relate because that is how it is in the little area that I live in too, when there's not as much access to stores and there's not as much access to getting supplies. People tend to share and barter and bring, and there's no quid pro quo. It's like, I have some seaweed, you need some seaweed, here you go. There's also a sense of history in both these books. And again, in The House on the Irish Hillside, Felicity talks about one of the neighbors was going to replace, she had like a stone step. So you're on the sidewalk, you step on the stone, and then you go into the house, because I guess the door was a little raised above the ground. And the stone step was getting a dip in it because from all these years of people standing, putting their right foot or whatever onto the stone, eventually it got worn down. So the neighbor said, well, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to save myself some money. Instead of buying a new stone, I'm just going to take the stone. I'm going to have somebody come over who's strong, and they will just flip the stone over, and we'll start fresh with a nice flat piece of stone there. So the neighbor came by, whoever came by, and flipped the stone over, and wouldn't you know, the other side of the stone had a dip in it too, and somebody else had already flipped the stone over. So both these books are darling. They are full of little anecdotes of neighbor helping neighbor, of having musical evenings, of having tea together, of baking, of going through the linen closet and remembering who gave what napkin to whom, and not spending any time on the telephone looking at social media, not spending any time in front of the TV, not spending any time rushing around from store to store every day. Just both books talk about just making do, talking to neighbors, figuring out what's in the pantry, making lunch or tea around that, having little gatherings, having friends over, going over to visit friends. Now, a lot of this might remind people of what life was like in the 50s and 60s, 70s, and 80s even, where people were much more likely to be in their own little homes, in their own little areas. Maybe you'd go on a road trip or you'd take a trip someplace, but you generally stayed in your own environment and made your own environment a beautiful place to be if you were capable of doing that. You knew your neighbors, you knew the traditions. There was a certain feeling of safety, of history. There was definitely a feeling of tradition, of safety, of knowing what was going to happen next, and a great deal less uncertainty than what we have today. I remember growing up as a kid, I always knew what was going to happen on Halloween. I always knew what was going to happen the last day of school. I knew what was going to happen the first day of school. I knew what was going to happen all the time, and that was very comforting. And there was nobody on any social media telling me what to do, to expect, to dress, to behave, to decorate a certain way. Everyone just sort of did their own thing with what they had. it is very difficult in this day and age to replicate that. We have to drive a long way to work. There are a lot more demands on our time, on our attention, on a lot of things right now. Our wallets, a lot of worries, a lot of global worries. We were not that involved with global worries when I was young because there just wasn't access to that information. So I guess what I'm trying to say is slow living is more challenging now than it was. These two ladies in their Irish worlds, their Irish villages, had a beautiful life, but they kind of had to make that life beautiful because these books are fairly new. They're within the last 20 years, maybe even 10 years. So they had to figure that one out by creating their home to be a pleasant place to be, and as a result having the outreach from their home be pleasant, and just do the best they can to take the moments as they come. So these two books were kind of a nice antidote to our day-to-day lives, at least mine. I mean, I'm in a way more relaxed place than many of my viewers because I'm no longer working. And I'm here on a mountain on half an acre, and I can spend time in the garden, and I can close the world away. But still the world creeps in, and its expectations and the issues and the problems and global events that are inescapable. So if you just want a little bit of time spent in a little Irish village, both these books are an excellent way to do that. House on the Irish Hillside by Felicity Hayes-McCoy, and Tea and Talk by Alice Taylor. They're both very pleasant. There's not psychological thrillers, there's no murders, there's no forward motion, drama, excitement, apocalyptic events, just a discussion of what happens in an Irish village over the course of the year, over the course of a lifetime. And I think sometimes we need to just sit back and do that. The time spent with these two books was time well spent. Anyway, what I'd like to know is, what is your idea of slow living? Have you ever thought about slow living or slow cooking and savoring the moment? Is that even a possibility? I don't know if it's a possibility for many of us, and there's no shame in saying that. Life is very different, but do you find a way to kind of grab a few minutes for yourself, or grab the evening or a set period of time during the day when it's just you and your cup of tea or a book or something like that, when you can just let go? I would like to hear that, and I think other viewers would like to hear that too. I'm going to continue on this topic. There's another book I'm going to read about detoxing from social media, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the experience of my friend Kim from Kim's Inspired Life, who did that detox, and I'll be covering that in a future booktube, Thursday booktube. So thank you so much for watching.